This is TWiT.
While we were gone for the holiday break, right the day I left, and I feel like it's old news now, but we haven't talked about it because we've been gone, the Apple iPhone battery kerfuffle.
Yep.
And I still don't know who's right in this one. So some Redditor, maybe Micah, you've done, some Redditors pointed out that as soon as they took their older iPhone, their iPhone 6, their 6S, their 5S, or their iPhone SE, as soon as they put iOS 11 on it, the thing got slow.
And it sounds like an urban legend, right? It sounds like, oh, it's getting slower because they want me to buy a new one.
And I've heard this so many times, and I've always poo-pooed it. Even Steve Gibson said this. I said, no, Steve, it's not slower. Yes, it is. It turns out it is. Apple finally copped to it, said, well, here's why we do this. And actually, I'm inclined to believe him. The problem is that as it's not the phone that's old, it's the battery that's old. And as the battery gets old, it can't reach the peaks of performance it needs to. In fact, the phone might crash if the battery is taxed. So what Apple did in the new operating system is it checks the state of the battery, and if it's an older battery, and by the way, we don't know what that means, checks the state. It could just check the date, or it could see what capacity. We don't know. Apple's not saying. But for whatever reason it decides that's an older battery, it limits performance peaks. It doesn't let the processor demand as much power because Apple's position, if you buy all this, is, well, we'd rather you have a phone that works than a phone that crashes. Now, it gets complicated because Samsung, Motorola, HTC, and LG, who make very nice Android phones, all said, well, we don't do that. Micah, do you think that those phones crash more because of it?
Well, there's been some interesting stories lately, too, with other companies where they are apparently, or at least it was said that they are limiting different apps' performance except for their own key apps. And so, in a way, they're also sort of,
Samsung got bit because they would check if a benchmark was running, right? And then they'd run faster. But normally, you wouldn't run that fast because you'd overheat and you'd crash.
Yeah. So this is such a complicated thing on many levels. And I have to go back to a little bit of what we were talking about before with the job of us as sort of tech know-how people in our families and among our friendships.
Oh, yeah. This was the topic of the week for Christmas week, right?
Yes, right.
What's wrong with what's the deal with the iPhone?
And it was one of those things where I am the stand-in for Apple among my family. So anytime something goes wrong, they always, are mad at me about it. But this was so frustrating because this was a situation where so many people got to say, I told you so.
Yeah. And you didn't believe me.
Right, exactly. And you want to be bigger than that, but frankly, I'm not. And so hearing I told you so kind of stinks. And
I will
they were
say
right.
I told you so. Also. But here's the thing. We have been you probably all have a washing machine, right? And if the washing machine breaks after 5 years,
no,
you'll get
actually, Mike goes down to the river and pounds his clothes on the rocks.
So for the rest of us who live in civilization, right? So, after a certain number of years, any mechanical device that any of us owns will break, and we will be told, oh, well, that's how it is. 7 years. That's about how long they last. Now, to be fair, there are real practical reasons for that. Bands wear out, the different pieces of the mechanics wear out.
And we know one thing that does wear out is lithium-ion batteries. They have a fixed number of charge cycles.
Sure. Yes. However, the difference between buying a washing machine and buying in the year 2018 and buying a mobile device is that, we've got crazy malware. We have Spectre out there, right? We have Meltdown. So we are now being told that we must update. Otherwise, we face problems. However, once we update, we may see that there are challenges on the other end. When we purchase a phone, consumers are under the misnomer that we own the device, right? And all we've really done is purchased the ability to use the device, but we don't have full agency over that device as we do the other things in our lives.
Good point. You may not have legal ownership. Many times you see EULAs that say you're only renting this. We own it. You're using it.
But the world was not always that way. It has been that way traditionally with the beginning of telephones, right? Because in the early days of phones, you didn't own the phone from Bell. you didn't buy it the way that you do now, but we should probably be asking ourselves, consumers are monetized in all these different ways, and we're basically paying for access with our mobile devices and then being forced to turn them in and buy new ones, even though they work pretty well, and we're still being monetized as part of the process because our information is being used and parsed and used in different ways. So I don't know.
The question is Apple's explanation credible, or are they doing it, as everybody has always suspected, just to force you to buy a new phone? That would be question one. Where do you come down on that, Mike?
I think it's actually not that black and white. It's a fine line between we want you to. I mean, clearly Apple wants you to upgrade. I mean, Apple is the kind of company where they want you to buy Apple accessories. They want you to buy a laptop every 2 years. They want you to buy an iPhone every year. They want you to.
Frankly, they make it very attractive to just automatically get the new iPhone every year by paying them $30 a month or whatever.
Absolutely. So
month, forever.
if you're guzzling the Kool-Aid inside Apple, which they all are. The idea that you would go 2 years or 3 years without upgrading your phone, you must be nuts.
That's the salient point. They don't even understand the issue.
No.
Because they're not using an iPhone 6. Who would use an iPhone 6?
You'd have to be nuts.
You'd have to be.
So it's a fine line, but at the same time, I think
can I add some texture to that?
Yes.
What Mike just said, because this is we are starting to finally see the sales of smartphones plateau.
Yep.
Right, for the first time, they're not.
We've reached saturation.
That's right. And by my modeling, so my job again is to use data to figure out what's coming. I would say that 2018 is the beginning of the end of smartphones.
Whoa.
So
I'd agree with that.
You heard it here first. You agree?
Totally.
Whoa.
I mean, not tomorrow, but again, there's just so many different signals that at that point towards the beginning of the end is now.
I think you said this before. What is going to replace this, though, Amy? I mean,
wearables.
What?
So
wearables.
If you think of where we started.
You said this for a while, Mike. Yeah.
So where we started was a landline that became a series of devices, a PDA, a pager, right? And then finally, over many, many, many years, many of these devices converged, and we're all now carrying a smartphone rather than, a cell phone and a digital camera and MP3 player and all those other things. So the funnel is now going in the other direction as we adopt all of these new, more advanced technologies, and eventually, many, many years from now, decade from now, we'll see a second area of convergence. Which will probably be some kind of thing that we wear over our eyes, combined with a hearable device, and probably a ring or a wristlet for the time being.
Oh my God! This sounds like a medieval suit of armor.
Sure, but if you were to go back 20 years and ask Leo 20 years ago,
no, you're right.
Right?
Would I be staring at my screen as I walk down the street in front of traffic?
And in fact, Leo, you are right now wearing hearables. You often wear glasses and you have a wristwatch. You're actually already wearing all that stuff.
And I'm looking at Instagram right now. So.
But eventually you won't need that one.
But here's the thing. That provides the incentive, right? Because Apple at the moment doesn't have any other products.
Right.
Right? So they've got to extract as much value out of this current thing that they have.
Brilliant.
Because
so they see the future coming. They're working hard on the next thing. Meanwhile, we got to squeeze every penny of profit out of the current thing.
I would add one final point to this, and that is that Magic Leap this year, they've got signups for their SDK.
They've got a developer edition coming out, right?
That's right. And so whether or not this is commercially successful, a la the original iPhone, we still don't know. But what we do know is that I would argue OEMs and the company, I think that our smartphone makers are probably concerned, and if they're not yet concerned, they should be, because they're going to have to, transform. 10 years from now, these stupid iPhones that we're all talking about, and Samsung and everything else, are going to look a lot like the flip phones of today. Few people will still have them, but everybody else will have moved on to something else.
Wow.
Apple's filed a ton of patents for various different wearable devices, so it's possible that what's happening, I think, with the updates and the batteries, part of it may be a hardware flaw, but part of it may just be, monetizing as quickly as possible before we enter this next phase.